Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. If it's anything like it is up in the Highlands here or where my guests are, the weather is stiflingly hot. So for those of you that have decided to tune in live, thank you so much. It's great to have you all here. It's Tomato Tuesday. I hope you've all got a drink ready and looking forward to a night of whiskey and food. I know I certainly am. It's two of my favourite topics. So, and in fact, if you go to the Tomato office, it's all we ever talk about is whiskey and food. So we're going to have a great evening tonight. For those of you that are catching this on the replay or listening to us on podcasts afterwards, that's absolutely fine as well. Thanks for joining in. The only difference is those of you that are watching live get the chance to ask any questions. And I've got two incredible guests tonight, so please get your questions in for these guys. We're going to have quite a lot to talk about. Like I say, we're talking about the topic of whiskey and food. And there was a time where whiskey and food was the oatcake that you got at a whiskey festival, or it was the shot of whiskey that you had with haggis on Burns night. But thankfully, we've moved on since those times, and food pairings is one of the things that I get asked most often as a brand ambassador. You know, what should I try with that whiskey? What should I pair this with? This morning, in fact, I was doing a training for our partners over in Malaysia, and one of the things they were asking was, what food should I pair with this? So huge amounts to talk about, and it's a subject that's incredibly vast. One of the books that I go to all the time is written by Bob Miniker, who's a legend in the whiskey game in Belgium, and these are dishes that have been created by Steph Rosebeek from De Kleisner, and I can't wait to get back over there. But this is all about how to use whiskey in making food and creating dishes. So that's one element of food pairing. You can pair it with so many things, with cheese, loads of ways we can go. But tonight, my guests are firmly in the pocket of what I call the sweet treats. We're going to be really talking to those of you out there with a sweet tooth. Tonight I'm joined by Johnny Balderae, from the founder of Whisky Donuts, one of my favourite channels to follow on Instagram. As we'll find out tonight, what he does over there, you can't really describe by words. You really need to see what they've been doing. And we're also joined by Alistair Birt, who's the head pastry chef at Harrods and UK chocolate master. So great guests, and I couldn't think of anyone better to join me to talk about this topic. So please welcome the guys in. Good evening, guys.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Of course, it's afternoon over here, Johnny. Yeah, it's not often that someone in Scotland, someone in London, and someone in California can all say that it's a very hot day. It's normally only you, Johnny, that gets to say that, right?
Yeah, right. That's a good thing.
Well, you guys can keep it as well, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not used to it. We're not used to it at all. But how are you guys? Both doing well?
Very good.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
No problem. I'm looking forward to this. Like I say, whiskey and food, definitely two of my favorite things, and being able to pair them together. I don't think there's many foods that don't go well with whiskey, but there's some that definitely go a lot better. And that's what we're going to be tapping into tonight. And like I say, more on the sweeter side of things. But before we do that, it'd be good to get a little bit of background on both of you, because you both come at this whiskey and food pairing and the food side of things from two totally different angles. So, Alistair, you're on the top of the screen there with me. Tell us a little bit about your background.
My background, so I've been a pastry chef, chocolatier for over 10 years now, which makes me feel old. Started as a commis chef in a restaurant, and kind of found my way into, as you say, the sweet treat pocket of life at university, studying culinary arts management, and then lucky enough to work with a Scottish guy called William Curley, who is Britain's best chocolatier, and he obviously introduced me to things like chocolate and whiskey pairings, matching chocolates to different whiskies, We had a great lot of fun kind of playing around with his wife at the time. Then was Suzu Curly, who was Japanese, and we used to have a big kind of Japanese whiskey influences to business as well, which was always fun to play around with. And then, yeah, like you introduced me, I did World Chocolate Masters in 2016, and then after that, I went to move to Harrods and have been there for 4 years as head pastry chef, where we do all kinds of things from sourdough breads to fine patisserie to desserts, afternoon tea, viennoiserie, you name it, we do it.
Yeah, I do love your little bio on your Instagram page, which is head pastry chef at Harrods and black belt in chocolate. So, within Harrods, we'll talk a little bit about your role there in a moment, but you cover the whole gambit now as the head pastry chef, not just the chocolate element, right?
Yeah, so and obviously there's a team of us there at Harrods. It's not just me, but with the team, we have a lot of restaurants there that we kind of cater for, and each restaurant has a kind of different look and feel, and obviously a different menu offering. We have the roast and bake hall where our bakers do all the signature sourdough breads, the 72-hour approved baguettes, and then there's my kind of passion where we do all the fine patisserie, where we do the classic eclairs, the Paris breasts, the entremets, and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, it's a very vast. There's not many places in the world where you would kind of experience that much kind of pastry under one roof. It's normally you have your fine dining tasting menu, or you have your hotel banquets and afternoon tea. But here, I'm very lucky to kind of experience everything.
Yeah, for anyone that's listening that hasn't been there, a walk around the food halls at Harrods is definitely worth doing, and definitely trying some of the things as well. But just when you walk into the food halls there, it's really quite a lot to take in. It's really, really an impressive sight.
Yeah, I think when you go there every day, you kind of take it for granted, and it's when you show someone around who hasn't been before, you kind of step back and you go, "Oh, actually, this is pretty amazing." It's a company there that's been over 150 years old. It was a grocer at its beginnings, and it still is. It's still kind of the heart of the store. These 4 amazing old halls listed part of the building, and we, like you say, we source fine wines, fine spirits from yourself, but also caviars, fresh fish every day, amazing meats. The cheese section just blows my mind every time I shop there. So that's really cool.
It's awesome. There's actually, when you're saying that, there's quite a lot of synergy between the Harrods and old Scottish distilleries in the way that there's just this steeped in history, and you can very often just you can maybe take for granted what's there and what's gone into building that collection there. But it's an incredible place. Yeah. Johnny, you're in California, and as you're talking about your background, maybe you can address some of the questions that are popping up, which are about how does what you pick to pair with food change with the temperature? There's a lot of people having whiskey and ice cream right now. So California is pretty hot most of the time. So how do you find yourself drinking whiskey with food? But before that, tell us a little bit about your background.
A little background actually has nothing to do with food, I guess. Short term, maybe more so, but just essentially a graphic designer turned creative designer. Designed for Vegas hotels to a lot of Food Network clothing, apparel, stuff from movies, from branding to marketing, but mainly the visual aspect of it. So I've got a slew and list of different things I've worked with and created. But yeah, I kind of found myself working with the Disneyland Culinary group, and I ended up shooting the menus for Disneyland, and so that kind of sped me up into the interest of just food photography in general. And that was even before the whole Instagram thing, and I just had a general affinity for it. So I think that's where the food kind of engaged itself with the creative link, I guess. Yeah. So, but as far as when it gets hot and I enjoy my whiskey out here, I guess you just put ice cream on the donut and enjoy the whiskey. I would say, during the summer months, whiskey it can change the palate for sure.
Yeah.
especially out here when it's 100+ degrees. So,
Yeah, I'll always recommend in weather like this a nice whiskey cocktail, like something tall, a whiskey and ginger ale over ice, absolutely stunning. But for those of you that have got ice cream right now, if you've got any PX matured whiskey, pour a little bit of that over cream, and that's just going to change the experience altogether. And we'll talk a little bit as well. So I know you did an experiment, so we can talk in a bit about using whiskey in food, but.
I reckon if you soak some sultanas or raisins with the PX whiskey, and then for like a couple of weeks, and then put that on your ice cream, now we're cooking.
Yeah, that sounds incredible, but I think the problem is in 2 weeks it's probably not going to be as warm. I think that's a tip for everybody. Nice. So let's get into it. We're all having a whiskey now. What whiskey have you got in front of you? And for the first time, I'm able to ask, what are you pairing it with tonight?
Go for it, Alistair.
Go for it, mate.
I think I'm going to pour actually, I'll put the pairing up later today, but it's that limited edition 15.
Oh, wonderful.
Muscat. Yeah.
So that's finished for 5 years in Portuguese Moscatel barriques from our partners over at Vinos de Bacalhau. Wonderful winery, and the whiskey itself is just full of these big orange and honey and blossom flavors. It's stunning stuff.
Yeah, I poured one out earlier. I wanted to compare. It's probably an hour or two. So look at the color on that, how
I like the nice little note there with the malt room glasses. That's a nice.
Have to.
A local whiskey bar. So if Matt and the guys are watching tonight, hello guys. I would invite Matt onto this, but the last time I had him on, he had me doing a dance in my living room and asking me some ridiculous questions. So if anyone wants to see that, you can rewind a few weeks and see me doing my favorite dancing move, the Running Man, when I was about 4 whiskeys evening. So
I think I saw that.
Yeah, and you still came on. I'm surprised. And so, what have you got to pair with that tonight?
Went to a local bakery here. It's called Black Market Bakery in Costa Mesa, California, and we've got a very American-style pecan sticky bun donut. Smells really good, and this is a chocolate cardamom twist donut. So I don't know if you can see that here.
It looks incredible.
It's amazing. It's giant. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that is a full meal you've got in front of you there. Those are not small little earrings. Yeah.
And if anyone here is trying to call me out and trying to finish this, that's not going to happen. No way.
Alistair, what about you? What have you got up there?
I have got this delicious rum finished 2009 bad boy.
Nice.
Really enjoying the rum cask finished kind of whiskies at the moment, and this one is particularly good, I think. Yeah.
That was released last year, actually. Wonderful stuff. Second rum whiskey that we've ever done. That was 1 year finish, and it has. Weirdly, it has a deeper rum flavor than the full maturation that we did a couple of years ago. It's got that lovely kind of banana tropical creaminess to it there, and I'm sure you have some nice chocolate there to go with it as well, right?
I do. I have some Ecuadorian 76% chocolate, and this kind of reflects really well with the tropical notes in the rum whiskey. It's got lots of banana and kind of tropical fruit, yellow fruit kind of flavors that will match really well with the whiskey that I'm drinking tonight.
Nice. Well, I was sitting here about 2 hours ago, and I realized that I hadn't had a chance to actually get out and get anything to pair with my whiskey. I was thinking, right, Johnny will bring the donuts, Alistair will bring the chocolate, I'll bring the whiskey. This will be a great evening. And then I realized it was a virtual affair, and I was going to have to shop and get something. So I ran down to the Co-op. I would have loved to have gone to Perk in Inverness, our local donut shop that do whiskey and donut pairings with the malt room. So I had to run to the Co-op, but they had this dark chocolate with orange, which I can never pass up anyway. From what I can tell on the packet here, it's Peruvian from smallholder farming co-ops. with orange in it, and that for me is going to go lovely with our tomato 18-year-old, which is finished for 3 years in Oloroso sherry butts. So you've got a bottle in front of you there, Johnny, and it's got a nice little orange chocolate undertone to it. So really, really pairing well together. Definitely not the same level of chocolate that you've got in front of you, Alistair. I remember some of the stuff that we got to try together was outrageously good, but it will do to be going on with, I think.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Let's find out a little bit about. Well, Johnny, let's start with Whisky and Donuts, because two brilliant things, Whisky and Donuts. How did that come about as a? How did you form that idea and then develop it?
By accident. It was just another creative experiment, really. My wife and I went out for a late honeymoon, ended up in the Moray area, and seeking heritage of my Scottish side, and we are both avid runners, so we kind of found ourselves amidst the distilleries, and we stayed at a place called Blue Folds Cottage. The owner, Steve, was a whiskey museum historian, and he basically forced the whiskey down our throats every night. And we got back, and yeah, right. We got back here, and I managed to smuggle a few bottles back here, and had some friends over, and we had a few drinks and ordered some donuts, and then we started just kind of sitting at the pairing table, and that's kind of where it started, the idea of it. And I didn't think much that it was actually a pairing. I thought it was more of a social statement. You know, the fact that you could get potentially a whiskey that's $100, $200, and even the most crafted donut, which is supposed to be the everyday man's just fast eating treat. Those, even the craft style, are $4 or $5. But what does that say about the two when they're paired? And as time went on, and as I began this Instagram account, people started saying that, no, you should pair this with this. And there was opposition to chocolate and berries and the different types, you know, whether it's brioche or a cake donut. And actually, I let myself give into this process, and there is actually some type of method. Obviously, whiskey and eating and food pairing is different to each person, but there is a methodology to whiskey and donuts. So I'd like to think so. But but you know, I'd like to think that the ethos for the whiskey and donut thing is the dough itself is kind of like the malted barley, the grain that's making the whiskey. And then the topping on the donut is kind of like the whiskey being put in a cask. So the cask is kind of the topping itself, you know.
Yeah. I suppose the toppings are just endless, right? There's no limit to what you can insert to a donut or add on the top, or different glazes. So the pairing kind of is unstoppable, really.
It's infinite, yeah. And that's a lot of people become intimidated by that or get discouraged, but I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, you know, more than anything, sometimes, like you just said, even a glaze, sometimes there's more different type of sugar, or there's a more lemon or citral content to it that really just affects the entire experience. So it's a funny thing, but I think when I went into it as more of a social marketing statement or something kind of branded, as I do with everything else. And I found that it's actually kind of a real thing, and people embrace.
What do you think?
Appreciate that.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Scott?
Sure.
You go for it, guys.
What do you think? What do you think it says about? You know, you mentioned the social kind of juxtaposition between having a fine whiskey and a donut, because I see this kind of thing popping up now and again with, you know, like we have a thing here called Bubble and Dogs, which is champagne and hot dogs. And, you know, lots of like fast food places that, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, they're fantastic hot dogs, don't get me wrong. And there's this whole thing of like upvaluing fast food or upvaluing fried chicken to, like, you know, the ultimate. And that's now the new cool. Or that's, instead of, you know, what do you think that says about us as a world, or is that too deep for us right now?
I really appreciate this question. You're speaking my language. I think that's why, where it's not so much the extremity, where it's I could definitely go to LA and find something where it's a giant pile of, say, Fruity Pebbles or some type of kids' colorful cereal and put it on top of a donut. And that's what's happening within food culture and drink culture. I think it's visual, and obviously it has to be kind of a snap or Instagram worthy something. And there's someone always trying to do something better. But I think when you have the content underneath it, and then that it actually is a good pairing, or it's a really good experience, that's all that matters. I've paired things where I've looked at it from a visual standpoint and I go, that's really unattractive, but I know what it tastes like. I have to convey that through words or sharing it or comments or returning a message or something like that. And I think that's what's important, is letting people be open-minded about their own palate and being confident when they speak to someone else, because like you said, in this world, it can be as spicy, it can be as sweet, it can be as a giant of a pizza as you want to, but unless you're sharing it with someone, that's kind of pointless, right? It's just a show off kind of, here, check this out. It's a visual.
Yeah.
So do you think by having these two things together, like you say, the donut is almost a daily treat, and you could say the same for the hot dog. It's a daily food. Well, it's probably not a daily food. That would be a terrible diet, but it's kind of like a let's say a low value historically product paired with something like champagne or like whiskey that has always had a high reputation and regard. Do you think it helps break down some of the barriers to entry into those higher values? Don't know where that's coming from. So I think it's on Alistair's end. I've just muted him. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
we're fine. We're all good. All good. Don't worry about it.
I apologise.
For anyone that's listening on the podcast afterwards, please note that all three of us were looking shocked there. We didn't know what quite happened.
Yeah, so weird buzz or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, do you feel that like these pairings help break down the barriers of some of these more these products that are held in higher regard?
I think definitely. I think it's an entry, not an entry point, but it kind of it demystifies, or it makes it more. It makes it more. I think there's a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? There's like a view of fine dining now that it's stuffy, it's old, it's old school, it's not fit for the modern, the modern millennial or the generation X or whatever we are at the moment. Whereas you can go and spend pretty much the same amount of money, or nearly the same amount of money, on some fried chicken and a really nice bottle of whiskey or champagne or whatever. And I think it's that kind of entry point. It's more approachable. If you haven't been brought up going to fine dining restaurants and stuff as well, I think it's more familiar.
Yeah, I think now from what I've been doing for as long as I've been doing this pairing process, I think it's more of I'd like to take the approach of celebrating everything, regardless if it's considered a delicacy or a high-end item to an everyday edible item. It's just the danger dog server on the street in downtown Los Angeles to someone that's making a 30-year-old whiskey. I want to celebrate both of them that are doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's just consumable, because in the end, we just consume it as divine as it might be. We're on to the next day. Time doesn't stop. And I think it's just being conscious in that moment, because you can't slow down time. Enjoy it while you have it, and then move on to the next. And just, if you can keep that memory, if you can remember that what your palate was telling you, that's a beautiful thing, and that's only going to make you grow and be more open-minded and more brave to try new things.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because just because the donut is $5 doesn't mean that there's not craft in creating that, and that craft should be celebrated in the same way that the craft of a whiskey or a chocolate or something like that should be celebrated. So that's a great way of looking at that. And you touched on an interesting point there. You were saying that a lot of these things seem to have started happening because of the Instagram world that we live in now. There's, when you're creating whether it be your food truck or something like that, there is an element of the visual, which is going to help build your brand. But I think what's been fantastic is just how important an element that is to what you do at Whisky and Donuts. It's not just about the whiskey and the donut pairing. it's the presentation of them in such a beautiful, remarkable way. And like I said at the top of the show, I can't communicate to people in words what you do, other than saying, go and give Whisky and Donuts a follow and have a look at what's on their story right now. That video that you've posted of the Moscatel and Donut today it's exquisite. That's the only word to use.
Thanks for technology and slow motion video. That jam just drips off the spoon onto that donut, and thank you for that. But I think that's the personal selfish satisfaction that I get is creating that content and that visual, obviously from my background and my interest of being just a creative artist or whatever it is. But I also know that what I'm doing, that's got to be for me. But when you put out that content, it's got to move people. It's not. It doesn't have to be spicier and louder and bigger and brighter. It has to move people. So I hope it does. I really hope it does.
We call that the money shot, Johnny. Every time I get someone comes to film a little clip about a recipe I'm making or whatever, and they always want to have like the spoon in the chocolate, and then lift the spoon up and the chocolate run off. Everyone wants that. Every director wants that.
For the situation, I think we should make plans for a photo shoot next time we're down there or over there. We'll do plenty of those. Drippy Harrods pastry shots.
Sorry guys, my Wi-Fi at 9:25 when we were doing this would be the greatest time to jump off the plank. So I knew you guys were going to be able to continue that chat, so I wasn't so worried. We'll just move on from there. I think that's a great idea that you're talking about there. You two guys working together. I would love to see what would come out of that, and I'd be more than happy to give you a whiskey to try playing about with while you were doing it.
Let's do it.
But moving on to that, Alistair, let's talk about whiskey and chocolate pairings, because it's one of the classics. We've talked about Whisky and Donuts, and we'll definitely jump back into it because there's so much more to talk about there. But whiskey and chocolate as a premise almost needs justification. Johnny, you were saying that you almost have to tell people why Whisky and Donuts work together, but when it comes to chocolate, it's kind of ingrained. It's one of those things that go so well together. I didn't realize quite what was possible until last year when I had the great privilege of co-hosting a masterclass with yourself and Will Torrent at the distillery and pairing the whiskies, not just with this whiskey will go well with dark chocolate, but actually picking chocolates with flavor profiles that complement the whiskey. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's fascinating.
Well, it was a real tough job when you sent down 7 different pure cask tasters to taste them all. I mean, that was a real treat, first off. And we have to say it was all for Maggie's, the charity in Maggie's Highland. It was a fantastic cause. Always happy to help Andrew at Maggie's. And we had a great time, didn't we? And I think the collation between whiskey and chocolate is so close, and there's so many different, so many similarities between them that make it such a perfect pairing. And you have to kind of, in terms of your two are in the world of whiskey, I love the stuff, but I've only got my foot in the door basically. And there's so much that I need to, I've learned from you, especially Scott, about the different flavor profiles, what changes it, why does it change it, what effect does the age, the barrel, all these kind of amazing things that you guys do. And it's the same for chocolate. Chocolate is not a generic ingredient. You have to think of it as like a wine with this terroir. There's different beans to different, so you call it different grape varieties if you wanted to, and there's different regions and different places on the earth where the chocolate grows, and each place has a different climate, different microclimate, and this all affects the flavor of the chocolate at the end, so that's the raw ingredient, but then also the processing, so the fermentation process that it goes through, the roasting process, the grinding, the crunching process as well. So there's so many different variables that change the chocolate flavor, and that's what that's why you can pinpoint the flavors of the chocolate to match. You give such great flavor notes on whiskeys that it made my job really easy, because you gave me the key notes, and I can find a chocolate in the world that could pair with it or contrast with it in a pleasant way. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
For example, this Ecuadorian that I'm eating tonight with this chocolate, it's from a really it has these big yellow fruit tropical flavors, whereas you can get really acidic red fruit kind of flavors, or we even paired one with a caramelized white chocolate, didn't we? So you get that real caramel. I think we did that with the PX.
That's right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So you get that real deep caramel flavor of the white chocolate, plus those gorgeous raisiny sultana notes from the PX one, and it just matches really well. So there's no end. And nowadays, because you can go and buy your generic chocolate, but you can also, if you look hard, you can buy single origin or even single plantation chocolates, where you get it from one part of the rainforest, or one farm in a single town from one farmer, and it's so distinct, that flavor is so distinct that it matches really well with whiskey.
Yeah. It was fascinating hearing you talk about those things, because like we said earlier, there was so much that rings true with whiskey. I mean, it's understandable why there's such a classic pairing, because so much of the, like you say, as from the ingredients through to the processing, it all has this impact. You touched on something there that I wanted to talk about, and that was basically at the core of whiskey and food pairing is this idea of finding flavors that either complement or contrast the flavor of the whiskey or the flavor of the chocolate. Like, ask you both, what do you prefer to do? Do you prefer the complement, or do you prefer the contrast? I'm a fan personally of finding contrasting flavors, because I just find the juxtaposition so fascinating.
Johnny, do you want to hit that one?
I would add a question for you, but yeah, go ahead. Take that.
I'll go first. I'm with you, Scott. I'm going to throw a rogue one in there. I'm a juxt of textures. So okay. I'm a big fan of, like a really, like if I'm something that's quite dry, like a dry wine or a dry sherry or something quite rich, and that kind of pairing works really well for me in terms of flavor pairings. In most of my cooking, and I normally go for like flavors that go really well. For example, I just created our Christmas range for Harrods, and I've just made like a gingerbread muscovado pecan kind of cake, whatever, with lots of vanilla, and those flavors, it's kind of brown sugar, muscovado, pecan-y flavors, they kind of all marry into one family. They're like that's what I really enjoy when I create food. But when I match it with but there's lots of different textures and different in that cake, and that's what I like in my food. But when I match it with a drink, I like to contrast.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I know where I'm getting my Christmas cake this year.
Yeah,
for sure. Johnny, you had a question for Alistair there.
This might be a really stupid chocolate question, but is there a prime percentage for the best chocolate? 80, 90% cacao. Is there something? I get this. Obviously different, but for cooking to just eating by itself, a la carte. But I'd like to hear from a whiskey chocolate pro.
So I get this question a lot, Johnny. I think there's a lot of. Sure. I get this question a lot, and I think there's a big misconception that 70% is good quality, means good quality chocolate, but it doesn't. You can get really terrible 70% chocolate. It's all about the quality of it's like anything, like whiskey or or donuts. I mean, if you need to have the raw ingredient needs to be good, so the bean itself needs to be good. So there's three types of beans: there's the Forastero, the Corello, and the Trinitero. The Forastero is kind of grown in West Africa. It's like a bulk crop. You can get a lot of crop from one tree, but it's normally said that it's lesser quality, so you get more bulk, less flavor. Where the other two, the Trinitero and the Corello, are harder to grow. You get less yield, but the flavor is better. But then, so you might have those beans, which is great, but then you, at the same time, you might destroy them in the processing. So you might over ferment them, which is really important and really interesting process in the chocolate making. This is where the beans are taken out of the pods, they're bundled up in banana leaves, and then the natural bacteria in the atmosphere will then start to ferment and break down the cocoa beans. And it's a process that the kind of manage. How long do I ferment? How hot is the weather? How humid is the weather? All these kind of variables that affect the end flavor. And then the drying, do you over roast them? You can burn them when you over roast them. How long do you roast them? Do you roast them in the husk? Do you not roast them in the husk? And then how do you crunch? How do you process them and crunch them? So what the question of what percentage is a good percentage, I think is misleading. I think the question is what denotes good quality chocolate, and that really is the producer and where the beans come from. You need to have obviously like a trusted, good quality chocolate producer. And I think that's, for example, what you've got there, Scott. I'm sure it's got Taste Awards smashed over it or something.
Yeah, probably.
And that's what you're kind of looking for. Looking for the smaller kind of branded stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I know it was kind of a broad one, but I've always just wondered. You look at the back of a package, whether it's something that's just supposed to be high-end chocolate or whatever, just a Kit Kat.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell.
You just look at the chocolate percentage, and you just wonder exactly what. Well, I do.
I think I always think a good example is how much do you pay for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's the expensive end, then I know it sounds terrible, but you're probably going to get a better product. But for me personally, I love from eating chocolate. I really enjoy eating like a 65% or a 66%, something that it's not too bitter, not too dark, but not sweet. I think for me, 66, 65 is where you get the peak kind of flavors from the chocolate. Many other people will disagree with this, but that's what I like.
And just touching on producers there, Alistair, I know you're an ambassador for Cocoa Barry, so just worth mentioning their name at the moment to get your ad reps in. So
yeah, so Cocoa Barry is not. You would never see Cocoa Barry on in the marketplace. It's like a chef brand, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny, I'm going to
Harrods, and I think I have a great brand.
Johnny, I'm going to jump back to you there because we talked a little bit about why whiskey and donuts work so well together. I love the analogy that the donut base is like the whiskey base, and that you work from when it comes to creating flavor. You add your fillings, your toppings. It's like your maturation and your blending technique. I love that. I was very lucky at the start, halfway through lockdown, that, as some of you know, the Malt Room, the local whiskey bar here, is right next door to a donut shop, as we mentioned, Perk. And they joined together. There we go. There's the glass. They joined together to host their own whiskey and donut evening.
No, you stole your glasses, Johnny.
Sorry?
Do they know you've stolen all their glasses? You don't want to be advertising this, do you?
Now they know.
You can never go back, Johnny. You can never go back.
That's why they had to close down that one day. They were just like, we ran out of these 2 or 3 glasses.
If only they had more glasses.
Yeah.
So that's thrown me there. Yeah, right. So no, that's quite all right. I was thinking the same thing myself. I was like, we've got a little magpie in the room, but so, whiskey and donuts, I think they work so well together. They put this pairing on, and when they posted it on Facebook, Charles MacLean, the world-renowned whiskey writer, but one of the, with justifiable cause, one of the most respected whiskey writers in the world, great guy. His comment, I had to laugh at it, was, I don't think so. Sorry. he was just not on board with the whiskey and donuts idea. And I found it hilarious because I think it was true to Charlie, but it also, I think it probably rings true for a lot of people, you know. Even when I talk about whiskey cocktails or things like that, if I go beyond talking about chocolate, cheese, and charcuterie meats to pair with whiskey and start saying, I really like watching a film with a whiskey and a bowl of popcorn, or I like whiskey and marshmallows, people start having a little. There we go. Alistair's on board.
Whiskey and popcorn is my film snack of choice. I love it.
It's so good, so good. But people start getting a little bit skeptical there, and I think there probably is an element of what we've already covered. You know, you've got the perception of high end versus the perception of everyday. How often do you get people kind of kicking back saying, whiskey and donuts, I'm not on board? How much convincing do people take?
Well, I think that strictly comes from the whiskey culture, because the donut culture is already open-minded about putting anything as far as a topping, or putting a burger in between it, or whatever it is. That attitude and that mentality is already there. But I think it's changing slowly. But I think I will always receive that opposition, and I enjoy that, because that kind of creates a discussion, honestly. The first time that we did a whiskey and donut pairing for the Spirit of Speyside, which was 2016, I think, and we were downtown Dufton, and we set up a 20-30 person pairing, and there was probably at least half the room that was in opposition. Here's this American bringing donuts, trying to do a different pairing, and by the end of the session, I think there was a lot of people just shaking hands, high fives, and just had a great experience. And people were smiling, and some people actually still with a smile on their face said, "This was the worst pairing, and I would have done it with this one." And that's exactly what I wanted, because it was an experiment. And I think hopefully beyond what I did as presenting a pairing, that person that told me the difference probably learned more about what they liked or didn't like, you know. So, and the fact that they were able to share that without some weird criticism, like, oh, it's a 30-year-old whiskey, I can't say anything bad about it, or whatever it is, or it's the high end. They felt completely open about saying it wasn't about the value of it. It was just about my palate and the two things on the table. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think I will always run into that. Go ahead, sorry.
So what do you think the difference between, and I'm gonna swing this into a pastry world. What do you think the difference between America and the I used to call it the old world, or Europe, is with food and drink pairings, or food in general? I've always found that US pastry or US cooking is, and also Australian, is so much freer than the European style, because we are so caught up in history and technique and heritage, and this is what it is and this is how it should be. Whereas I find in America and Australia it's much more like, hey, we're making up our own rules, this is what we can do. So do you see that difference with the whiskey pairings across the pond?
Definitely. We were in Manchester a few years ago, and we actually met up with a donut shop called Yes Donuts out of Manchester, and we went and did a beer pairing with Brewdog. I think it was a Brewdog.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah,
in Manchester, and I thought it was quite filling between the two. But the people that were there were very, you could tell that they were very progressive as far as who attended, because they let all of Manchester know. They put that out, whether it's social media or in ads, and it was a group of maybe 20-30 people, and people were really receptive. And then I go up to Scotland, where it's Whiskey Festival, celebration of just the product itself, the juice that's in the bottle, and it's about that, and it's not about the food. So if there's any opposition, it's about the possession of, I know what I like. And I think changing that mentality is a beautiful thing. Always getting someone to go, no, I'm not questioning what you like, just try this. My dad is exactly, I think that's where I got it from, because even though I didn't want something for dinner, he'd put that on my plate and be like, no, you want to try this. He's Filipino, so Filipino dishes are odd. there's a lot of weird, odd flavors, and sometimes it just doesn't go with other things. But I think I slowly learned to embrace just flavor and difference, just because contrast, like you're saying, texture contrast is that's the spice of life for sure.
Yeah.
But I embrace the differences of people opposing whiskey and donuts. I think it's a great thing.
I think it's great that so many people that maybe weren't so on board with it also went to the tasting. That's again, like you say, it's quite progressive to that people are willing to have their mind changed now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But my experience of going to it was a virtual one, albeit, but a whiskey and donuts pairing. I think a lot of people probably signed up to it because it was something to do on a Wednesday evening during lockdown. You know, there wasn't a lot to do, so we had this. But what was great to see was people not so much focusing on what their favorite whiskey was or what their favorite donut was, but on the pairing element. And this was my favorite pairing. So it might very well have been your favorite whiskey of the night was not involved in the pairing, but that combination was what stood out for you. I think that's kind of what is at the point of everything that we're doing here and talking about is it's the result is greater than the sum of its parts almost.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I totally agree with you.
Sorry,
go
on. Well, I was going to say is I think people are lying to themselves when they're not affected by something visual. Where Tomatin, for example, is such a beautiful designed bottle that sometimes beyond picking it off the shelf, that does affect your judgment in when you do consume it. It's same with packaging to the presentation when you bring something out, whether it's pastry or something in a restaurant. And I think giving into that and embracing that, knowing that it's part of the allure, and then getting past pushing aside your favorite whiskey or whatever your preference, and then having those two pairing elements and just taking it for what it is in that moment is pretty much the secret to life, I think, because that you're going to taste more, you're going to be happier about it. Otherwise, you're going to be like, oh, how come I didn't get this expression with this donut? You're going to forget about what's in that moment, right then and there. So yeah, I completely agree. That's amazing that first pairing, people were so open-minded with the malt room and perk pairing, because you can tell that after they did a few more, that they were a lot more people were really excited about those. So
yeah, I think the second one actually sold out before the first one was finished, which was ridiculous.
Everyone rebooking.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So they eventually got to the point that they had 2 bottles worth, so you could have more people involved and things. But yeah, it was a great thing. Alistair, you were going to say something there.
And I was just completely agreeing with what you were saying, Scott, mate. I mean, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, like I said, it might not be your favorite chocolate, it might not be your favorite whiskey, it might not be your donut, but the fun of actually finding the pairing of what that whiskey and that chocolate or that donut went so well together, it kind of made it a better experience than just eating the donut or the whiskey or the chocolate by itself. And that's what I really enjoy when we pair. I've been to a couple of restaurants where they serve whiskey with the dessert, and it's such a. This is going to sound such a first world problem, but when you do like a flight of wine tasting with your tasting menu, it's really nice to get to break it up with something different than wine, because after 9 glasses of, albeit small wine, it's really nice to have a whiskey at the end or a vermouth to match with something. And you're trying not to laugh at my story here, Scott. I can see.
Yeah.
Trying to keep this in London now. Coming here with it. Wine tasting dilemmas.
All that I can think is, oh, poor guy. My heart is there. But no, you're right. It is nice to have something to cut apart the same.
Yeah, and finding, like you said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and finding that this chocolate souffle and this whiskey make the whole experience better than just having it by itself. Yeah, completely agree.
I think that's why you're in the position that you're in. It's because there's that passion for the search, right? The search of the flavors together and being open-minded to it. So that's half the battle, at least, or if not more. Yeah.
Speaking of the search, I want to touch on something, because the first time I met Alistair, and Johnny, this is going to be something that I know will make you slightly jealous, but hopefully you get to share this experience in the future. First time I met Alistair, he gave me a tour of the food halls at Harrods, and then took me down into the kitchen to see what the guys do down there. And it was when we were down there that Alistair said, "I've got this idea. I would like to try whiskey cask infused chocolate." So we sent down some staves, and Alistair, I guess this is the time to find out if it's worked or if it hasn't worked. So tell us about the idea and how that came about and where we're at now with it.
So the idea was basically, how can I get whiskey flavor into chocolate? Now, whiskey is a liquid, and if I put any liquid near chocolate, it's going to turn it into a ganache, which I don't want. I want the pure form couverture, as we would call it in the industry, chocolate. So how do I get the whiskey flavor? I don't want to use whiskey flavorings, or not. That's not for me. I'm completely opposed to all that kind of, oils and all that kind of stuff. So how can I get the whiskey flavor? And I'm slowly learning more about and the differences between a bourbon aged and a rum aged and a sherry aged and all these really, really interesting and different kind of woods and stuff. Really amazing. So I've done a couple of experiments where you put chocolate and spices or strongly aromatic aromats into a bag together and sous vide, close it under pressure. So and then let the two elements intertwine. So chocolate is full of cocoa butter, which is the fat in chocolate, and fat really absorbs flavor from everywhere. And it really worked well with things like vanilla and tea, coffee, spices, pepper, really, really aromatic flavors. You would taste the chocolate and it would have absorbed the Earl Grey or the tea malt pepper or vanilla beans or whatever I'm adding into it, without having to change the structure of the actual chocolate. So Scott very kindly gave me some red wine staves, some bourbon, some sherry, different maturities and stuff, and I wrapped them up in muslin cloth, chucked them in a bag full of dark chocolate, sous vide them on for 3 months. Very, very excited to open them up and taste them, and I wish I could give more of a successful story. But the experiment continues. It didn't have, when you open the bag, you could really smell the whiskey from the stave and the wood, which is what I wanted, but it didn't impart onto the chocolate for some reason. But what I did is, funny enough, Harrods is an amazing place, and on the roof of Harrods we have a wood workshop where they do all the woodwork for the shop fits and all this kind of amazing stuff. So I took up to the woodworking place, which I never knew existed until I asked. And they chopped it up into little tiny pieces, and then I even got some made into sawdust, put that into muslin, and now that is infusing, and it's due to open in about 2 or 3 weeks. So Scott, I will give you a full rundown if the chip-ins and sawdust works.
Live stream?
Is the theory there?
Live stream, yeah.
Is the theory there that just the stave, and it was a small cut of a stave, but in the single piece just wasn't able to impart into the chocolate, and that by cutting it up you might get more compounds coming out?
Exactly, yeah, more surface area to kind of connect, more compounds, like you said. And I added some more extra cocoa butter to the actual chocolate, so there's more fat to absorb more flavor. So hopefully we should have some results there, because I think it could be really, really exciting.
Yeah, I
to age chocolate in an aged barrel.
Yeah, I think it can be great. We worked with a company last year, a tea company, a couple of years ago actually, and they infused their tea in a whiskey cask, and it totally had an impact on the flavor of the tea. So to see that working in chocolate would be so exciting, and I look forward to speaking to you in a couple of weeks and finding out how that's worked and hopefully better results. But I touched on what Johnny was saying there about the journey, looking for the flavor and searching for it, and that's such a big part of what you do down at Harrods is that research and development element, right?
Yeah, and it's one of my best parts about my job. I love the most. I mean, like I just said, we finished Christmas about 3 weeks ago, so we're about, we're 5 months ahead of everything. We're just going to start on our Valentine's and Easter range for next year. And yeah, sourcing new ingredients. And it's also great because Harrods is just a larder of fantastic produce. So, you just have to go upstairs to the food halls and have a look around for inspiration so yeah, that's a wonderful part of my job that I really enjoy, and also enjoy sharing with my team as well and get them involved as much as possible.
Yeah, nice.
We'll see you next year then.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely come around, man. You're welcome anytime. Yeah. Have you got any interesting projects you're working on, Scott? Because I know you've got, you're always working on some secret. Anything you can tell us?
So that's the 2 points of difference right there. Is, are we working on anything, and is there anything I can tell you? So we had planned this year a limited release, which would have been around about now, a limited series, and that's been put on the back burner to next year. But it's really exciting. It kind of touches on a style of release we did a few years back, but brings in new flavors to it that was really popular. So looking forward to that. For anyone in the UK, we have a UK exclusive being bottled at the moment and going out kind of, I believe, late September, early October. So that'll be something nice to keep an eye on for that festive period. There's loads of things that we're working on in the background, and a part of my job is the buying the casks and kind of like looking for flavors for the future, and a couple of so casks is a big element of that because it's 70% of the flavor. But a lot of what we've been talking about recently is some of the experiments that we can do in production and see what they'll lead to. Because if anyone hears me talking about the whiskey production, I often talk about the production process from barley, yeast, and water through to new mix spirit as the science. And the aim of the science is to get it right every time and be consistent. And then the maturation is the art element, and that's where you can be a little bit more expressive and play about. And that's certainly what I tap into a lot more. But we are now kind of trying to do a couple of things in production that will give us new flavors in the new mix spirit that we can pull in different directions. So the only problem there is it's a few years before they ever see the light of day,
Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with that kind of long lead time of knowing whether you've made the right choices or not? Because for me, I mean, I make a cake, I taste it. If it doesn't taste good, I make it again until it tastes good. Which is a very short turnaround. For you guys, it's like, I'm going to try something that no one has ever tried before, and it's going to be 5 years before I can work it out if it's good to go. So what's your your timelines are just crazy.
Yeah, they're massive. I think I think that's one of the fascinating things about whiskey as well, particularly when you get to the core range. You develop that and you stick with it because it's good, and you keep going that way. When it gets to beyond the core range, we'll only ever release things that we believe in, that we believe are high quality, but we're always striving to find the next one. And what's a really cool part of it is that when it comes to nosing a cask, many of the casks that we'll nose have been distilled and filled long before we started working at the company. So these are we almost have to take care of other people's experiments in many regards. So say for example, you were going into Harrods and the last head pastry chef had created a menu. you have to look after that menu until your new menu comes on board. So we've kind of got to look after all these experiments whilst we're also doing our own. And a big part of that is doing a wide variety of things in the hope that one of them works, and kind of going with it. So we're very lucky that we get to do that, and so very often.
Do you have any techniques that you could, I don't know, not in your lab or whatever, but do you have any techniques that speed the process up so you could be able to taste what this would taste like in 30 years, but I can taste it in 5 years? Do you have any techniques, or maybe you don't want to tell us right now, that could intensify the maturation, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, on the cask side of things, it's very difficult because what that comes down to is an understanding of the cask itself and the spirit. So that's where Graham Munson, our master distiller, is just a genius with this. He understands a lot of the flavour of the previous contents of the casks. So the Moscatel that Johnny's sipping on right now, he understands that that's got this lovely honey, orange blossom flavour to it. And there's a very good chance that that will work well with the core elements in the tomatin spirit. But beyond that, you can never know for certain. Again, I think that's part of the joy of whiskey. When it comes to the production experiments, what you can do is you can nose and taste the new make spirit, and you will be able to gauge the differences in your new make spirit and kind of apply that to, well, we know what our new make spirit does in a bourbon and a sherry cask. If we alter this part at the beginning, this is kind of how it should go, on what cask it should work well in. But yeah, like you say, the timelines is the biggest thing with whiskey. I think the most difficult thing is not necessarily what will work from a flavor point of view, but predicting consumer trends for 10, 20, 30 years down the line is very, very difficult. Are the things that we consider to be experimental today going to be the norm by the time we release the product? And you can never know what other companies are working on as well, what the competition's doing. So there's so much. And Squanugi's come in with, Scott, as you have a Japanese owners, have you never tempted to try Mizunara casks? And that's a great, that kind of follows on very well to what we're talking about here, because Mizunara casks is one of these ones that we've been able to work with the cooperages with. And
Scott, can I ask a question for a novice here? What are Mizunara casks?
So Mizunara is it's Quercus mongolica. It's a different oak species, and it's native to Asia and to Japan, and they're incredibly, incredibly rare. And the reason for this, it's a story that I'll never tire of telling. The way you get a Mizunara oak tree is you go into the forest and you stand at the tree, and they are auctioned, and you're bidding in an auction to get the tree that's in front of you. The Forestry Commission in Japan only release a small number of them every year. But you're not only fighting with spirits producers. Mizunara oak is used in instrument production by violin makers and piano makers. It's used in furniture production. So you're bidding against everyone. To put it into perspective, a bourbon barrel costs around about £100. A Mizunara oak cask costs, for a bad one, about £2,500. So there's a huge, huge difference there. And what we found when we were looking at the scientific, the mass chromospectral, that sort of thing, that's going to give you an insight into what the cask is made up of. It's never going to give you the full story. But what we found from looking at that is that Mizunara oak casks, they actually mimic the flavour of bourbon barrels quite a lot, American oak, up until about 20 years. So if I bought a Mizunara oak cask today, it'll be 20 years before you're able to really tell that it's different from a bourbon barrel beyond the marketing of it. If I stand in front of you and you've got a glass in your hand and I tell you how different Mizunara is to bourbon, it's very easy to understand that. But if you taste it in a blind taste test, not so easy. So it's going to need to go back to your question. It's not something that we've done. We have used Japanese shochu casks, but they are American oak casks that have been filled with shochu. So, a long answer to a very short question, but as you can see, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the chocolate. It's maybe not quite as simple as you would like it to be, and that's the great thing about it. But
it's
I have a,
fascinating.
oh, good. I have a Tomatin whiskey question here. So, for example, this Muscatel, finished 5 years, or would you say it's finished, or is it aged 5 years? How would you say
so
that's?
what I would say then, that's aged 15 years.
Okay, so
It's a
15.
15-year-old single malt. What we've done is the first 10 years have been in ex-bourbon barrels, and then the final 5 years we've taken it out of the bourbon barrel into the Moscatel casks, and that starts what we call the finishing process. There is discussion as to at what point it becomes double maturation rather than a finish.
Right.
Sometimes you hear the term finish applied to something that's been in a cask for a month or two. 5 years is a very long finish,
Yeah,
but I think
and that's what was intriguing to me is that usually when they say finish or something, it's not nearly as long as 5 years. But the question was, before that, the 10 years in this one, I know this one says cask strength, for example, is bourbon and sherry. Is there a secret, or not secret, but the standard Tomatin whiskey ingredient that's the base of all of these?
No. I wish it was that easy. That would be fantastic if we had like a base at 10 years old that we worked from. No, it's all about different things. So the two products that you've got in front of you are actually a great way of describing this. The cask strength is what we call a marriage. So it's bourbon and sherry casks that have been fully matured and then married together. So that's almost more blending flavors, but it's a single malt because it's all from the one distillery. So what we're looking for there is for both flavors to be very prominent and to blend well together. So it's first fill bourbon barrels and first fill Oloroso sherry casks, maximum flavor married together. On the Moscatel and on all of our finishes, so like the 18-year-old that I'm drinking, the Tomatin 14-year-old, we fill the whiskey into refill American oak casks. So these are bourbon casks that we've already used once before. And that means that for the first phase of the maturation, the influence of the oak is going to be lighter. You're going to get more of the distillery character just oxidizing and developing. And we use that as the base for finishing. And the point of those two is not so much the balance of flavor, but to show the full flavor of that finishing cask. So that whiskey that you've got in front of you there, it shines a real light on the flavors that you're going to get from Moscatel, just like the 14 does on port and things like that. So
interesting.
There we go. I wanted to go back to you guys because we've talked a lot about donuts for you, Johnny, chocolate for you, Alistair. Out with that, do you have other whiskey food combinations that you really like trying?
Oh, we've touched on one of mine. My favorite kind of unwind whiskey, when I like to have a wee dram, as you call it, and I like to make myself a nice big bowl of outrageously salty popcorn and watch a film and have a nice whiskey and there's a few pop. That's one of my favorites. But I'm also a massive fan of adding whiskey into kind of like caramel. So make a caramel and then add whiskey at the end. I think deep sugar, especially if you use Muscovado or whatever, and then add a shot of whiskey once it's cooled down.
Nice. Johnny, just before I move on to you there, I just saw there was a question coming in. I can't even see who it came from, but it asked from a coopering point of view, how difficult is Mizunara oak to work with? Again, we've not had any, so I can't say from first-hand experience, but from what I've heard, it can be a bit more difficult than American oak. It's not quite as watertight, so it's prone to leakages. So that would be another reason that we wouldn't use it. To spend £2,500 on a cask that can't even hold whiskey would be a futile pursuit, shall we say? But yeah, so from what I've heard, it is quite a difficult one to use, but we've not tried it ourselves, so I can't say for certain. Yeah, Alistair, I agree. Whiskey and popcorn for me is just such a nice thing to unwind with. If I'm going to watch a film, I'm going to have popcorn, and there's a good chance I'm having whiskey. It almost came to me. I never at one point said, I'm going to pair whiskey and popcorn together. I just happened to have it one night and go, oh, this is
two of my favorite things.
Yeah. It really worked well together. Johnny, what about you?
I'm into the whole protein aspect of the fish, meat, porks, beef, that type of thing. I think that's something that's a little bit more refined to me. It's maybe more like the bitter chocolates and stuff, the differences between the two. But from fish to fish, we have an abundance of different style of fish, whether it be just fresh seafood to the whole Japanese and Korean culture that's out here. Whiskey goes very well with some of the vinegary stuff, kind of spicy. And back to the popcorn though, I'm just thinking to myself, because I can taste the popcorn saltiness and the butteriness. Do you need to have a big old glass of water next to you? Does it kind of just get very sodium driven at the end of it, or?
I mean, you probably.
I'm interested. I'm so intrigued. Yeah.
if you were to ask your personal trainer, he would probably say yes.
I'm not one for saying any passing judgment.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Water's for win, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Water's for win.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not saying for health.
I will always promote responsible drinking. I always advise people to have a glass of water with every glass of whiskey. The night is a great experience, while let the morning after be a bad one. If you're having a lot of popcorn and whiskey, it's a good chance you're going to be quite dry after that. So yeah, let's have some water and just make sure we're all drinking responsibly there.
Just needed to clarify that. Yeah. Have you guys had experience? Obviously, you do. That's a lot more traditional with the protein aspect with meats, and I know cheeses have been paired with different meats. And what's your thought process on the whole? Just take away the cheese, take away the breads. Anything that's
I love I think there's a big thing right now coming from your part of the world, Johnny, barbecued meats and whiskey glazes, that kind of thing. That works really, really well. Whiskey in a cream sauce I can see working really well, and whiskey in a jus not so much, but no, definitely whiskey with anything. Scott,
I've been very fortunate in my job to attend whiskey dinners around the world, which are exactly what they sound like, a whiskey paired with each dish. And it's incredible to see how different cultures really shine through. So one of my favorite whiskey dinners I ever went to was in Malaysia. Big banquet hall with 200 people. Every dish was a food that I had never tried before in my life. And the whiskey worked so well with it. And that is a testament to the chef, understanding what he's creating, trying the whiskey. I am by no means a great cook, but I know kind of what flavors will work well with what. But yeah, I'm a big fan of whiskey and protein. And actually, this book that I was talking about, single malt flavors, if anyone sees it, it's brilliant, because what they do is they give you an idea of how to. So you infuse the whiskey itself with Bunnahabhain in this example. Infuse it with star anise and leave that infusing. And then you use the whiskey star anise aroma on Spanish pork teamed up with celeriac, and you add the sauce and spray the whiskey onto it. And this is what you get. Steph over at De Kluizner in Belgium. De Kluizner is in this tiny little town.
Wow.
And it is possibly my favorite restaurant in the world. He's just a master of whiskey dinners. So there's so much that can be done there. I totally agree with you. Whiskey and protein really does go well together. Personally, I've always thought what I would enjoy, rather than necessarily pairing the whiskey with the dish, I like wine or beer with food. What I would like is the whiskey going in between each dish. So the whiskey almost being the method of transport from one dish into the next.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But that's purely because I like wine and I want to drink wine as well. So it's not necessarily that I don't like wine. Yeah. So we've gone an hour and 15 minutes, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Just one last question for you both. For people at home who are looking to, they've got their friends coming round, lockdown's ending, they're meeting up with a couple of friends, and they want to pair some food with a couple of drams. What suggestions do you give to them?
Sorry, Scott, can you say that again? I couldn't quite get you.
Yeah, he dropped off or something.
Sorry, did I drop there? I was just saying, if people are having company round and they want to pair food with whiskey, what tips do you give to people at home?
Wow, for me, it's exactly what Gus. It's having fun with it, right? It's matching a really nice it's matching what you like together. So if you like chocolate and you like whiskey, you can't go too wrong with it. It's how detailed you want to take into it. There's always, you very kindly put tasting notes on the bottle of your tomatin, and most chocolate bars will have the same effects. They'll have the taste notes, and you just need to marry those things together if you wanted to go that far. But for me, for me, I like these kind of things like this. I keep going back to this rum casking, but rum is that deep, dark brown sugar. So if you match it like a sticky toffee with this bad boy, I mean, we're singing, right? We're in a good place.
Oh, pretty close.
There you go.
I would say
fun with it,
if you're having friends over and you're doing a whiskey pairing, I think the perfect world, and I think we can all agree right here, is shut up, sit down. Here's 2 donuts with a handful of popcorn, shove them in between, and enjoy, right?
Yeah.
If you don't like it, get out of this house.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyone who doesn't like whiskey, donuts, and popcorns, I can't be friends with you, I'm afraid. So this is not the house for you to come to. But I think you're right. I think I would echo those sentiments that it is about fun and it's about experimentation. You're not always going to get it right, but when you do, it's going to be, you're off to the races. So I totally agree with you there. So for anyone listening still, fun and experimentation, and you can find probably any food group to work with whiskey. Fruit and whiskey is exceptional together. It doesn't have to be these sweet decadent treats that we've been talking about tonight. Guys, thank you so much for your time tonight. Whiskey food pairing, a broad topic. Everyone, go and give Alistair and Whisky and Donuts a follow on Instagram. The stuff that Whisky and Donuts are doing over there, like I say, what you posted today, Johnny, with the Moscatel is just exquisite. So there you go, and you can buy your Whisky and Donuts T-shirt as well at whiskyanddonuts.com. So go and get that sorted. And if you're ever in Harrods, make sure to go to the food courts and see if you find Alistair and try some delicious treats. So, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time, and Slàinte mhath.
Thank you.